Today we'll have Reverend Mark Gallagher speak to us for the sermon. He was a UU parish minister for about 25 years, mostly in Vancouver, Washington, where he now carries on a private practice ministry of preaching, teaching, and spiritual growth work. We hope you'll stay after the service and chat in breakout rooms and get to know each other if you haven't already. It's been the custom at the Vancouver Unitarian Church for well over a decade to acknowledge that we are here on the unceded lands, in our case at least, of the First Nations people, which in our case it's the Coast Salish people, which constitute the Tsleil-Waututh, the Musqueam, and the Squamish. And I have lived in this area for most of my life, and I love the big cedar trees and ocean and mountains that the First Nations people have stewarded. The NAUA does 3 regular events each month: the worship service, a monthly academy program, and now happy hour. So you can check into naunitarians.org to see the upcoming dates for those opportunities. And we've now got a committee structure with lots of opportunities for volunteer work, which is not all that onerous, I would like to say. So let anybody here know if you're interested in that. We accept donations, and someone will put up the QR code as a way of making donations to the NAUA. And of course, all over the website, there's opportunities there to and unlike some organizations, there's no specific amount required to join. So you're welcome to either subscribe or join the email newsletter group. It's expanding over time. All right. So we'll move on to our worship service. I'm sharing the words that were in the Liberal Beacon, written by Twinkle Marie Manning, The Dark Season. And it spoke to me partly because of the earth turning, but also it's kind of a dark season in our world right now. We are at the threshold of the seasons, the doorway to the year when the veil is thin, and time passes amorphously. We turn inward as the darkness beckons us. We welcome the warmth of the fire, contemplating the mysteries of the unseen. We honor the soft ache in our hearts for those we have lost, the people, the dreams, and we rest, for rest we must to heal. This is the cycle of death and rebirth, release and renewal. We cherish this time as the lessons it offers penetrate our knowing. May we breathe in wisdom and breathe out patience. May we find comfort in the warm embrace of the dark season. Bob Meyerson is going to light a chalice while I read words from Annie Dillard. We are here to abet creation and to witness it, to notice each thing so each thing gets noticed. Together we notice not only each mountain shadow and each stone on the beach, but we notice each other's beautiful face and complex nature, so that creation need not play to an empty house. So now we'll move towards a song. It's 298 in our Singing the Living Tradition book, Wake Now My Senses, and the words will appear on the screen.
Wake now my senses and hear the deep call. Feel the deep power of being in all. Keep with the web of creation your love. Giving, receiving, as love shows us how. Wake now, my reason, reach out to the new. Join with each pilgrim who quests for the true. Honor the beauty and wisdom of time. Suffer thy limit and praise the sublime. Wake now, compassion, give heed to the cry. Voices of suffering fill the wide sky. Take us your neighbor, both stranger and friend, praying and striving their hardship to end.
Not yet. Now we're going to have a recorded story for all ages called How Mindfulness Empowers Us. And if you've come across this story before, you may know it as the story of the two wolves.
There is a story, usually attributed to the Native American tradition, which illuminates different ways of paying attention. An elder, talking to a child, says, "I have two wolves fighting in my heart. One wolf is fearful, vengeful, envious, resentful, and deceitful. The other wolf is compassionate, loving, generous, truthful, and peaceful." The child asks, "Which wolf will win the fight?" The elder responds, "The one I feed." That doesn't mean we try to deny or hurt or kill the angry wolf. If we did that, we'd end up in a long battle, all the while somehow making that wolf more powerful through our hostility and fear. Hating that wolf sucks the strength right out of us. Instead, we calmly pay attention to the angry wolf and let go of believing they have the answers. If we can do that, they end up lying down next to us, no longer an enemy. We help strengthen the kind and loving wolf, giving it nourishment and support so that we can follow it. That peaceful wolf can become our steady companion and show us the way through all kinds of different life experiences. Restful or chaotic, enjoyable or disappointing experiences may come and go, but we can have a guide with us through it all. This is what mindfulness can help you do. Mindfulness allows us to see our thoughts and feelings as they are beginning. It's very powerful to know what we're feeling as we're feeling it, know what we're thinking as we're thinking it. With mindfulness, we can choose what will strengthen and bring into action, and we can choose what we will gently let go of. We don't have to be at the mercy of old habits or old ways of thinking or old ways of being. We are empowered. It just takes practice.
And Twinkle has a reading for us now.
Work in Progress from Within My Illusions by Jennifer Bloom. I am a work in progress, like the spider web outside my window on the first day of fall. The first day I noticed it, I thought it was perfect, intricate, delicate, concentric circles spanning 2 feet across, a quintessential image, an ephemeral thing, strong enough to endure daily forces and pressures, but easily forsaken. A late afternoon thunderstorm rips through.
So
I think that's my cue. Sorry, Twinkle said this might happen. It's Terry here. I'm not sure exactly where she was, but I'll start again. I am a work in progress, like the spider web outside my window on the first day of fall. The first day I noticed it, I thought it was perfect, intricate and delicate, concentric circles spanning 2 feet across, a quintessential image, an ephemeral thing, strong enough to endure daily forces and pressures, but easily forsaken when a late afternoon thunderstorm rips through its fabric. But the web is not abandoned, that gaping hole I saw the night before is filled by morning, sealed with a new weave, rendering it whole once again. I am a work in progress, the unfinished painting, the half-written poem, the dough still rising.
There's a little bit more to the poem. Am I frozen?
Oh, I think, Twinkle, I read the whole thing while you were frozen.
There's page 2 is I am the sky at dawn.
Okay.
Wondering why children are taught that I am blue when right now I am pink orange and often a hue of deep space filled with stars. I am a work in progress, perhaps more like the spider than the web, mending tears and tending to the cracks that lace my heart. I am a work in progress and still I am complete. Mark, over to you.
Okay. Good morning, friends. A while ago, I was looking at YouTube and I saw a video with the caption, "Humanity Still Exists." It showed people rallying to rescue a child who was stranded on a rock in a flooding culvert. It was beautiful to see the people rushing to the child's aid. But I wondered, what's with the caption? Humanity still exists. Like, you probably think there's little humanity left in the world, but here's an exception. As if usually people would just walk by and leave the child for dead. Another time I was listening to a game show on NPR. The host starts to pose a question. Some experts are predicting the collapse of civilization by the year 2050. And one of the contestants shouts, "Good!" And the live audience gives a roar of laughter and applauds. The Atlantic magazine recently queried a number of experts. If you could go back in time and change one thing, what would it be? A Rutgers history professor said, the invention of agriculture, and listed ways she believed life was better before agriculture and would be better without it. Wait a second. A serious and educated person has just publicly declared that she would undo the whole of civilization, which after all doesn't exist without agriculture. What is going on here? I recently typed the beginning of a Google search. Humanity is a, and the search engine suggested virus, plague, cancer, mistake, and parasite. which I guess means that these are the most common ways of completing that phrase in a Google search. I could go on with examples like this. It's been fashionable for some time to express disdain for humanity, for civilization, or sometimes just for Euro-American civilization. I have to confess, I've done it plenty over the years. I think it's a way of signaling that I see through the Pollyanna cheerleading. I see what we're doing to each other and to the natural world. Maybe it seems like a little harmless exaggeration, but I've come to see it as both cynical and tragically consequential. Think about it. If a public figure were to wish for the collapse of just, say, the Social Security system, would we laugh? What if they hoped for the collapse of the medical system, the electrical grid, the US government? What if they rejoiced at the prospect of, say, 25% unemployment? Would we laugh? Would we consider that a sage perspective? Yet the collapse of agriculture and civilization would entail all those things and much more. The great majority of us would actually die of starvation and disease. Among the few survivors, unemployment would be at 100%, and everyone would be living in what we now call dire poverty. I believe this attitude of disdain for humanity and civilization, even if often expressed with a sort of wink, contributes to the anxiety and depression which are so widespread today. While there are undoubtedly many factors contributing to our growing mental emotional crisis, tacitly believing that your culture and your society are rotten, that maybe civilization as a whole is rotten, and that your species is a cancerous plague, such collective self-hatred surely takes a toll on the psyche, a heavy toll. Further, I find it hard to believe that this cynicism doesn't play a role in the political radicalism we're seeing in America at present. Something both the right wing and left wing seem to agree upon is that humans are stupid and vicious, and the world is an awful place, though they would cite very different reasons for thinking so. Not coincidentally, both the right and left wings appear eager not just to reform and improve social systems, but to topple or dismantle them, which actually makes sense. If you think things are so bad, there's almost nothing to lose. I've come to believe this fashionable cynicism is a bad mistake. Bad mistake in that it's harmful to our mental health and to society. And bad mistake in that it's wrong, incorrect. What is going on with this? First, I think we have a terrible misapprehension of how bad things are in the human social order, in our own country, in Euro-American culture generally, and in the world overall. I've spoken elsewhere about how we tend to have the impression that there's a lot more war and violence in the world than there really is, and how we tend to mistakenly believe that things are getting worse when they have been getting demonstrably better, much better, in ways that we profess to care a lot about, recently and in the long arc of history. I won't rehash all that today, except simply to note that across the world, over recent decades and centuries, people are living much longer and healthier. A much smaller portion of humanity is living in poverty. Rates of violence are much lower, though the total amount is higher because there are a lot more of us. And more kinds of people enjoy increased rights and human dignity. No guarantee these trends will continue. It depends on what we do. With 8 billion people, yes, there is still violence and injustice. People sometimes behave very badly, and our social systems are still flawed. Sorrow and hurt over those things is appropriate, sometimes even anger. But I think it's a big mistake to think that things are worse than they really are, or that things are getting worse in ways they are really getting better. This misapprehension is part of what drives world-hating cynicism. Second of all, I think a lot of this arose as a healthy and warranted skepticism about the self-congratulatory story Euro-American civilization was telling itself in the 1800s and early 1900s into, I guess, the 1950s. All problems were either solved or about to be, and all that was really needed was to get the whole world operating on the Euro-American pattern. But then, in rapid succession, racial injustice, gender oppression, government corruption, environmental degradation, and skepticism about the Vietnam War and war in general burst into our cultural consciousness, the 60s. To some extent, what happened was an expose. Realities that had been kept out of public awareness were revealed. We saw that some things were not as we had been thinking they were. And to some extent, it was a moral awakening. Realities that were already widely known were reappraised. Race and gender hierarchies came to be seen not as ordained by God or determined by nature, but as corrupt power plays. Things that had been widely accepted by the mainstream of society were declared morally offensive. At first, just in progressive circles, but gradually more widely. With this profound disillusionment, the idea that humanity and Western civilization were just swell careened to the polar opposite view that humanity and Western civilization were rotten. There were indeed oppressions and corruptions which needed to be acknowledged and confronted, and that happened and is ongoing today. Here's my oversimplified take on the culture war raging today. The cynical traditionalist says things were great in the 1950s. The critiques of the 60s were bogus. Let's go back to the way it was in our imaginations. The cynical progressive, on the other hand, says things were incredibly rotten and nothing's changed, or else it's gotten worse. So a healthy and warranted skepticism seems to have, unfortunately, devolved into warring cynicisms. Now, my third and main observation about this scornful attitude toward humanity is that the issue is altogether ill-framed. We're looking at the situation all wrong, in my opinion. We have moral ideals, and we're disappointed to notice that some of us violate those ideals quite shockingly. We notice that our social systems don't always reflect our ideals. It's natural that we feel disappointment and heartbreak. But I've got to ask, did humans appear on Earth in a state of moral enlightenment, like angels, who then fell from grace? Was it our inherited animal nature to be consistently non-aggressive, kind, and generous to all? Were we the inheritors of a just and egalitarian social order, which then fell into corruption? No. We were not immaculately conceived in moral perfection. We are not fallen angels. We are Homo sapiens, one of the many creatures which have evolved on this planet. The currently fashionable cynicism suggests that not only are we not the apex, the point and purpose of evolution, but we are the one terrible mistake. But remember, we are animals with an evolutionary imperative to survive and reproduce, to get food and avoid becoming food, to cooperate and to compete within our social group and between social groups. We are animals, mammals primates. These predispositions still live within us. On top of those animal predispositions, we somehow evolved remarkable powers of thought and communication, and elaborate patterns of thought and communication, culture, in other words. With thought and communication, we've developed extraordinarily nuanced social relations. Our cooperation and our conflicts have become exquisitely complex. With this, we've become tremendously successful in surviving and reproducing. So our numbers vastly increased, and we extended our habitat over the entire Earth, in the process of exerting tremendous influence over our environment. To a large extent, we now determine which plants and animals may live where, by planting crops, tending livestock, diverting water, and so forth. But in judging humanity, we've got to consider these two things. A, all species survive and reproduce and expand their habitat to the fullest extent possible. In boom times, they go, plenty of food, few predators, let's eat, let's reproduce, go, go, go. And they do that until external conditions set limits on them, usually a dwindling food supply or an increase in predators. B, many social species have dominance hierarchies. Certain group members get more food, more sexual opportunity, and so forth. Within animal groups, there's a great deal of what in a human context we would call injustice. Among some of our favorite species, for instance, cougars, polar bears, and our closest relatives, chimpanzees, it's routine for adult males to kill juveniles of their own kind who aren't their own offspring. If you've ever watched those David Attenborough nature documentaries, this will probably be familiar. Neither maximizing reproduction and habitat, nor what we call injustice and cruelty are distinctive features of humanity. But here's something that does seem to be distinctive about us. We have developed moral sensibilities. We are moral animals. In our extraordinary, abstract thinking minds, we form judgments about right and wrong. Over decades and centuries, our moral sensibilities have tended to become ever more refined, our moral standards ever more elevated. A couple of illustrations. Just a few centuries ago, torture and death were common penalties for relatively minor crimes. And moral sensibilities were such that ordinary people enjoyed going to watch those punishments meted out. Pack a lunch, bring the kids. We're going down to watch the executions. Now, how does that compare to today? Then, too, as recently as my childhood, forms of prejudice and indignity around race, gender, disability, and physical appearance were commonplace and little questioned in decent society, which are uncommon and shocking today. Also in my lifetime, there's been the painful realization that the overall large-scale result of we humans doing our thing is degrading the natural world. And in consequence, individual humans and whole human societies have been rallying themselves to change. It's true that billions of people in thousands of social systems are, surprise, not all of one mind as to what exactly is going on and what should be done about it by whom. And yet it's a fact that much is being done to try to avert environmental disaster and reduce injustice. This is moral progress. But here's a terrible paradox. Moral progress is a good thing, but it tends to feel bad. We look at our improving social order, reevaluate it against our faster rising moral standards, and are appalled. As we get better, our standards rise, and so we judge ourselves worse. It's moral progress and a good thing to become more sensitive to cruelty and less tolerant of it, to expect higher levels of cooperation and kindness. It's a good thing to expand the franchise of dignity, to reevaluate and reform oppressive social systems. In the midst of moral progress, it's understandable but misguided to think, but cruelty and injustice should never have existed in the first place. Really? Where do we think we stand to make judgments like that? Do we think we stand outside of human culture, that we can look back and scowl at it? Do we think we stand outside the natural order from which we can cast judgments on the species Homo sapiens? Do we see ourselves as freelance cosmic commentators in a position to scold the author of creation? It makes no sense when you think about it. We are an expression of the universe. We are a feature of the universe. We did not create ourselves, complete with our animal nature and our convoluted human psyche. We are not fallen angels who have betrayed our perfect moral nature. We are mammals with moral sensibilities. We strive to constrain powerful instinctual urges in accordance with our moral sensibilities. We set up elaborate structures of social understanding and behavior, culture, to promote the enactment of our moral sensibilities. We make judgments about the culture and seek to improve it relative to our moral sensibilities. We negotiate conflicting understandings of what's right in our families, in local groups, and in vast nations. As it turns out, not without difficulty. The point is not that it's fine for us to behave badly because we're animals. We are moral animals. It's right and proper and perfectly in our nature to feel and strive in relation to our still developing moral sensibilities. But the fact that this process has not reached a perfect endpoint should be neither surprising nor appalling. For myself, in my wiser moments, I consider it an honor to participate in this worthy and mysterious enterprise.
Okay, the closing words I've chosen are from Wayne Arneson. Some of you may know as a UU minister and very involved in the UUA over the years. He's now retired, but I like to insert a bit of CanCon, Canadian content. He was born in Winnipeg and was a fourth-generation Unitarian from the Icelandic Unitarians who settled in that area. And his middle name is Bergthor. I had not known that until I looked him up. So take courage. Take courage, friends. The way is often hard. The path is never clear, and the stakes are very high. Take courage, for deep down there is another truth. You are not alone. So we extinguished this flame, but not the warmth of our community, the light of knowledge, and the fire of commitment. Go in peace.